Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Ashley Shavillian, and I'm here to testify in support of House Bill 433, the Department of Education Protection Act. Across the country, with the new administration, we're seeing increased efforts to reduce the role of the U.S. Department of Education. Talking about decentralizing it, cutting staff, or shifting all the authority to the states. They frame the federal oversight as unnecessary, but for millions of students, the Department of Education is the reason that they have access to the educational services that they need. If the department's dismantled or defunded, the impact would be devastating. We would lose the agency responsible for enforcing civil rights laws like Title IX, funding and monitoring programs under IDEA for students with disabilities, supporting low-income students, and administering Pell Grants for higher education. Without the federal protection, states could implement wildly different standards, and students in the marginalized communities, especially those with disabilities, students of color, and low-income students, would face the most serious setbacks. House Bill 433 is pretty straightforward. It prohibits the use of federal funds to reorganize, reduce, or dismantle the Department of Education. It's not about getting more powerful or expansion, it's just about preservation. It's just showing that we value the department and the services that are provided through the department. So we don't want this to be gutted or defunded. This is a good idea because we need consistency and accountability in education. This federal oversight ensures that a child in Colorado will receive the same quality of education as a child in Alabama or in California, whether or not they have disabilities or regardless of their skin color or their income. We know what happens when federal protections are removed. Civil rights violations increase, special education services will become inconsistent or entirely inaccessible, and funding gaps will get bigger. This bill is attempting to prevent that just by keeping the current infrastructure in place. This bill is supported by education advocacy groups, civil rights organizations, disability rights networks, all who understand the real-world consequences of dismantling these federal protections. That being said, I respectfully urge this committee to support House Bill 433 to not allow the current administration to dismantle the Department of Education and strip students of the rights and resources that they need to be successful. Thanks for your time and consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Denise Beltran, and I am here to testify in support of House Bill 433, the Department of Education Protection Act. This new administration that is currently in power is trying to dismantle the Department of Education. And if this succeeds, it will negatively impact millions of students and their families as well, who heavily rely on this department. And we're not talking just about financial aid for higher education, but we're talking support for students with disabilities that rely on the Individual Education Disability Act, or better known as IDEA, which they also helps out with overseeing stuff like IEPs, which allow them to have a well-constructed plan in place to help students succeed within their school systems. This program will also help, or does help, make sure that we have equitable and free access to public education for these students. Not having the Department of Education or having it dismantled would not be helpful, as many of these students and their families would suffer in the process. Currently, over 7.2 million nationwide depend on IDEA and that federally enforced IEPs that we were talking about earlier. Again, not having this would affect their successes and being able to show their full potentials within the school setting and having access to equitable care. Not only does this population get affected as well, but so do minority populations, low income students coming from those low income households, as well as students of color. Being able to have things protected like Title IX, that allows them to also be protected in their civil rights. In order to have millions of students and families that rely on these federal supports, we need the Department of Education. And that's why we urge you to pass House Bill 433. This bill would prohibit the use of any federal funding to dismantle, defund, or reconstruct the Department of Education in ways that would not be effective for these students or for their families. Passing this bill supports and protects vulnerable student populations by making sure that they have access to that free and appropriate public education. Protecting the Department of Education would also prevent uneven access to students across the states. Without the Department of Education having it fully relying on each state, we don't know what type of services would be available or supports would be available to students from one side of the United States to the other. So, being able to have the Department of Education be able to have oversight in seeing this would allow more of that equitable service. There, this bill would, like I said, continue to have that oversight and enforce those civil rights and protection through IDEA. So we urge you to please think about the Department of Education and how we really want to make sure we keep the efficacy of this department to be able to protect the rights and the access of free and appropriate education for not just students with disabilities, but as well as students of marginalized populations like low income students, as well as students of color. They should be able to have access to their education in ways that they can show their full potential and be able to succeed and have the support that they need. So I urge you to support House Bill 433 and be able to help and think about the students in your lives. Think about yourself as a kiddo. Did you need those supports? Did you need those helps? What would a world look like without these supports and having an oversight over these things to make sure there is appropriate and free public education for students in these vulnerable populations that deserve to have a voice be heard? So please, I urge you to support House Bill 433. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Hello, Chair and members of the committee, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Kennedy Patty, and I'm here in strong support of House Resolution 433, the Department of Education Protection Act. The Department of Education serves as a critical safeguard, ensuring that states uphold consistent legal standards in education, translating federal mandates into local accountability, and enforcing civil rights protections that states alone have historically failed to implement equitably. Efforts to dismantle or weaken the department would not simply shrink government, they would strip away protections from millions of students, particularly students with disabilities, students from low-income families, and students attending minority-serving institutions, historically Black colleges and tribal colleges. The department's oversight ensures that more than 7.2 million students with disabilities continue to receive a free and appropriate public education under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, also known as IDEA. It secures access to Title I funding for over 50 million public school students and enforces the civil rights protections that guarantees educational opportunity. House Resolution 433 would prohibit the use of any federal funding to dismantle, defund, or restructure the Department of Education in ways that reduce its authority or its effectiveness. Protecting the department protects the legal rights of students and preserves the critical funding that supports their education. Without this centralized department, we risk returning to a fragmented system where protections vary state by state, leaving vulnerable students exposed to discrimination, neglect within their education, and inequity. Support for House Resolution 433 is not only a vote to maintain a federal agency, but a vote to defend the civil rights of students and to uphold our national commitment to educational equity and opportunity for all. So I urge you to support House Resolution 433 to protect the rights, resources, and futures of all our students. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to present in front of you today. I'm here to talk about and support Bill H.R. 433, the Department of Education Protection Act. When I heard about the new administration's aspirations to dismantle the Department of Education, I was taken aback to my first grade year and the learning struggles that I had. I remember being incredibly overwhelmed and distracted because I had a learning disability. I couldn't fully comprehend what the teacher was teaching me at the pace that she was teaching at. It is because of the Department of Education creating and federally funding the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA for short, that I was able to get the help that I needed to be successful in school. It is because of IDEA that I was given an individual education plan, IEP for short, where I had learning goals and objectives that helped me be successful. And I can honestly say, without that IEP, I wouldn't have been able to pursue higher education. And I can honestly say that I was incredibly fortunate to have had the special education teachers that I had. Names such as Miss Mills, Miss Lopez, Miss Flores, Miss Navarez, Miss Jones, and so many others that helped me be successful because they had advocated for me and taught me, even though I had a learning disability. It is because of IDEA and because of the Department of Education that I'm the first person in my family to have a college degree, and next year to be the first person in my family to have a master's degree. And I can honestly say none of that would have been possible without these services. Millions of kids like me rely on IDEA services, not just in Colorado. And if we dismantle the Department of Education, these millions of kids will suffer with not getting their needs met, as well as the amazing special education teachers that teach these kids. It is paramount that we protect the Department of Education by supporting Bill H.R. 433, the Department of Education Protection Act. Thank you guys, and I'm ready for questions.